joining us. This is the 11th meeting for the Greater Downtown San Jose Economic Recovery Task Force. And I'm a task force co-chair joined by my fellow co-chair, Wisa Umera. And for our attendees, thank you for joining us today. There will be an opportunity for you all to participate during public comment later in the agenda. And if you would like, feel free to click on the raise hand feature, or I guess it's *9 if you are calling in to get in the queue. Okay, so let's do a quick roll call, and please unmute yourself and announce that you're present. Brendan Rawson.
Here.
And Wisa Uemura.
Here.
Gabrielle Antelovich. Phil Mastrocola. Fernanda Carrera.
Here.
Adriana Amador. April G.
Here.
Hi, April. Chris Patterson Simmons.
Here.
Enrique Fernandez. Jimmy Sarfraz.
Yes, I'm here.
Jeff Arilaga.
Here.
Jay Ross.
Here.
Scott Guggenheim. I thought I saw Scott. Okay. Myself, Dahlia Rawson. Alan Gumby Marquez.
Here.
Hi. Takahiro Kitamura.
Here.
Hi. Laura Chmielowski.
Here.
Jonathan Perez. And Stacey Shi. And Blage Zalalech. Okay, I know we've got some connectivity things going on, so I think we'll push forward. So Lisa, I think you're up next.
Thank you. We're going to move on to our usual old business. The first action item, or the next agenda item, is to approve our October 21st meeting minutes. As you guys know, as you all know, the purpose of approving the minutes is to ensure that our meeting is being captured accurately. I know the D3 staff has had the minutes linked in the agenda and sent out the reminder a few days, either yesterday or a few days ago. So if everyone is comfortable, I'd like to ask for someone to make the motion to approve the minutes for October 21st.
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Taki. Do I have a second?
Second. Brendan.
Thank you, Brendan. Thank you. So if we can all unmute to approve, let's say yay.
Yay.
Yay. Thanks for the thumbs up.
Yay.
All right, any opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? All right, minutes are approved, thank you. We're going to move on to the next item will be Councilmember Paralysis report. So Councilmember, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Wisa. And we certainly have a full agenda today, so I'm going to be brief. Next Tuesday at the City Council, we will have one agenda item on our alfresco program, and it will be a recommendation to extend the program all the way until June of next year, June 30th of 2021. And at the urging of myself and several council members, we are going to require additional safety measures for outdoor operations on private property. And we're going to extend permissible business hours for the outdoor operations right now only within the downtown core, though. And then we will expand the list of allowable equipment that may be used in the outdoor business areas to allow for cold weather operations and make other amendments. So if you're interested in speaking in favor of that or chiming in with any thoughts or recommendations, feel free to tune in next Tuesday. That does come towards the beginning of the agenda, but unfortunately we can't set times for that exactly. And that's it.
Thank you, Councilmember. Several weeks ago, as many of you know, we had a meeting with the two county council representatives. As a follow-up, the council member invited the county to come back to continue the conversation with our task force. So we are thrilled today to have Supervisor Ellen Susan Ellenberg with us today. Supervisor Ellenberg has served District 4 for the past 2 years and has been an ally to small and local businesses. She has been an advocate for sensible policy approaches at the county level to balance public health with economic stability. So before we begin, I'd like to share our usual format for this portion. The supervisor will provide a short update, and then we'll open it up to Q&A from our task force members. And to ensure that every committee has the opportunity to speak, we will go through each of the committees for their questions and feedback, and then reopen it up for discussion via raised hand feature. Afterwards, we may also go to public comment if there's time. We'll have to see if time permits. But a friendly reminder about our house rules. We all have heard this before. Be respectful at all times, step up, step back, stay on topic, and be mindful of the time. So Supervisor Ellenberg, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I really I am delighted to be here with all of you today. As much as delight is an appropriate word these days. 2020 has presented us with enormous challenges. The worst California wildfire season on record high summer and fall temperatures, an energy crisis that has left too many of our residents and businesses in the dark, and of course, and most obviously, the global pandemic, COVID-19, that we're talking about here today, and all of the connected crises that this pandemic has caused. But I don't think this is how 2020 is going to be remembered. I think it's going to be remembered by how you, have responded. When I look at the innovation and the adaptability of our business community and how you all have mobilized, shifted, and improved so rapidly in so many cases to keep your employees working, your customers served, and our residents safe, I have no doubt that this ultimately will be the story of 2020. Thank you for what all of you do every day, and thank you for inviting me to join you. Government, too, has a story to tell. The decision to issue a wide-ranging shelter-in-place order in March was extremely difficult, but was also extremely bold. As we watch cases of COVID surge around the nation and the world, in fact, today is recorded as the highest single day number of cases since the pandemic began. We should count ourselves lucky that we live in the county of Santa Clara, where we are just not seeing that. The premise from the very beginning has been this: our economy will roar back faster and more fully if we control the virus better. But that doesn't just magically happen. The second half of our government's 2020 story is really just beginning. In order to make that premise a reality, it takes us making the right steps to succeed in the post-COVID world here in our county. And a big part of that is for governments at all levels to partner and work together. Councilmember Perales, thank you. Thank you and your team for organizing this council and for bringing in partners like Assemblymember Kaura and our county officials to deepen these partnerships. The other big part of how each level of government takes on its core responsibilities is what our roles are. So before I take your questions, let me talk for a second about what I see are the county's 3 core responsibilities at this point in the crisis. First, and truly easiest, to listen, to come to meetings like this, to hear from the thousands of constituents in the arts, business, labor, and faith communities. And I'm hearing from all of you every day. You will always get that from me. I am not, and frankly, no one in our administration is an expert in every single industry. You know your business, and I believe that you know best how to make recommendations on keeping yourselves, your clients, your employees, your customers safe. Second role is to demand data-backed and scientifically driven decisions from county administrators and our health director. I want to be clear up front that Dr. Cody has done a phenomenal job throughout this process. Her primary focus is the health and safety of our residents. And as I stated up front, any one of us would be hard pressed to show that she has not accomplished one of the most positive outcomes in the country. But with that said, Dr. Cody and her colleagues still work for the residents of Santa Clara County. And in my mind, that requires her to demonstrate to the public how she is making her decisions. Early in this process, I got the support of my colleagues to create dashboards for the public to see how our country was progressing on case counts, hospitalizations, deaths, necessary PPE needs, and other measures, so that this responsiveness would always be front and center. Later, I also successfully advocated for similar dashboards to be put forward on how our CARES Act funds were being spent. And I'll continue to call for that level of transparency and accountability for the duration of this emergency. Third, and finally, it is the responsibility of this county to make sure, particularly as winter approaches, that the businesses we are keeping closed by our local orders are made as close to financially whole as possible. That's why on Tuesday, October 20th, Supervisor Simidian and I secured passage of a referral to our county administration, asking them to come back in November with a plan to secure up to $100 million in low interest loans to our small local businesses who continue to be impacted by local public health orders. If we're able to financially bridge the gap to a vaccine while keeping case counts low, when all of this is over, our local and regional economy will come back stronger than ever before. I believe this type of program is a first important step in doing so, along with an exploration of expanded commercial eviction moratoria and ensuring that we lessen regulatory burdens on small businesses during this time of unprecedented external burdens. So thank you again for inviting me to join you today. I look forward to conversation, to answering your questions, and taking this discussion in whatever direction is meaningful to you. So let's do that.
Thank you, Supervisor. We're going to give each committee 4 minutes to converse with the speaker so that all committees will have an opportunity. I'm going to apologize in advance if I have to close your committee's time. This is done out of respect for all the committees and members present. And out of fairness, we're going to reverse our usual order of committees. So we're going to start with personal care. Taki or Gumby?
Gumby, you want to go first?
Sorry, wasn't ready for that one. I'd like to get more information from Ms. Elberg about the loan program, $100 million. What that program entails, how well that will be dispersed. This is literally the first time I've heard of that.
Okay, so let me just explain very quickly the referral process and the distinction between policy and operationalization. Joe and I put forward a policy whereby we want our administration to come back with an operationalized plan of how this loan program can be put into effect. So one of the primary consideration, of course, is what is our funding source? We need to have a financial partner. There are some examples around the country of this, a financial partner that can issue the low interest loans. Possibly one of the models that may come back as a recommendation to us is county guaranteeing or backing the loans. We have to be careful because unlike cities who have economic development as one of their core functions, county governments are not generally set up that way. We have to be very cautious about not doing something that could be called a gift of public funds, which is why we can't do grants. Also the fact that we have a $300 million deficit. But we're looking at a funding source and partner. And then in terms of prioritization, we are going to look first at small local businesses who continue to be closed entirely or limited in their operations as a direct result of our local county orders. So for example, right now, there's a distinction in indoor operations between what restaurants could be able to do under the statewide orange tier and our more restrictive county requirement for indoor businesses such as restaurants right now. That's an example of a type of small local business that is impacted directly by the county's order, in some cases being stricter than the state's. So that's the kind of group that we are going to be looking to fund first. And then depending on what the funding is, we're looking at amounts up to $100,000. What we're finding is that the $5,000 and $10,000 grants that many cities have fortunately been able to do for businesses haven't been sufficient. You know, they can carry you maybe for a couple of weeks. So we're looking at bigger loans, 50,000 to 100,000 to those small businesses, with terms as absolutely rock bottom as we can get them. And I'll have more detail when our administration brings back those recommendations at the, I think the 2nd November board meeting of the Board of Supervisors. But I'm happy to provide Councilmember Perales more details on when that report's coming back and make sure he can send them out to all of you.
Yeah, I actually had a question. So like my tattoo shop's been open now for almost 2 months. And I think our industry opened and we've seen just declining numbers of COVID throughout this whole time. So I guess the worry is if there's a shutdown, will there be some sort of like, will they look at how each sector handles, like, you know, because like, will we get blamed, I guess, in essence, for like a larger spike? And then will there be more like, will they take into account like, you know, how businesses performed?
Certainly nobody is looking to place blame. I mean, we are literally all in this together. If our cases spike, certainly it's always possible that we will have to roll back our openings. Part of the reason that we've been so successful in not having to roll back is that we've gone forward so much more slowly than other counties and frankly other states. And while I understand fully that that's very frustrating to local businesses that remain more limited, it has meant that we have only moved forward since this crisis began. We have moved from a full shelter in place to the purple tier, to the red tier, now to the orange tier. It's not fast enough for businesses that are struggling, but it has proven again and again to be the right tack from a health perspective and avoiding us having to go backwards. And my hope is that nothing that's open currently will need to be shut back down.
Thank you. We'll move on to our Performance and Entertainment Venue Committee. So that's Scott and Dahlia.
Scott, are you there? I think he was planning to take this.
Oh, your audio. Yeah, I see you. You're unmuted, but we still can't hear you.
Scott or
Yeah,
myself?
Scott.
Yeah,
Scott,
okay.
I can hear you, Dahlia.
Okay.
He's trying to find a good location.
I think he may need to update his Zoom account because I know there was an update, so that might be also an interference.
Maybe I can just go ahead, or do we want to move our committee to later, or should I just go ahead and ask our questions?
Yeah, let's skip maybe the committee and we
Yeah.
can come back to it. Yeah.
Sounds good.
All right, we'll circle back. Then we'll move on to large employers and property owners with Jeff or Jay.
Susan, nice to see you.
Hey, Jeff.
Thank you so much for joining us today and being a part of this conversation. It's really terrific to have you here. Really appreciate hearing about the potential for a loan program. And I understand, I get a sense of where it is in the process. What other opportunities and energies and efforts is the county undergoing to line up additional dollars that could be used to help businesses and property owners get back to operating?
So to be honest, Jeff, most of the economic...
This is Jay.
Jay. Hi, Jay. Sorry about that. I'm looking at my camera and you're over here. Anyway, so it is really the city governments, particularly large cities like San Jose, that have been given the funding to push out to local businesses for economic recovery. The CARES funding and other federal and state dollars that the county has been given has largely been directly for the public health response and for things that are directly related to health issues. I had a meeting yesterday with all of the urban counties in California, 14 of us, and not one of them is even considering looking at a loan program like this, and have all said, well, the cities have to do economic recovery. We're doing the health and safety pieces. So with our budget deficit and with the lack of funding that can be earmarked for small businesses, the county doesn't have a lot of options. Of our 15 cities, the vast majority of them are offering some small grants to their local businesses based on the amount of CARES funding and other funding that they have received. But we've gone out of the box to look at this loan program specifically because we don't have internal dollars to do this.
Okay, and you mentioned, and we all understand that Santa Clara County is more stringent than what the state is allowing, which is in some levels of frustration, particularly to businesses. Help us see inside the office there. What are the discussions like that from the county supervisor perspective that gives us confidence that the county supervisors are pushing the health officers to be mindful of the risks that the constituents and businesses are willing to take relative to the desire to be reasonable in protecting health?
So the best way to have confidence in what we're doing and what we're advocating for is to listen to our public comments that we make and the questions that we ask the public health officer every 2 weeks at our board meeting. At least 3 hours, God help us, is devoted to a public health officer's report at every meeting. All of the supervisors have an opportunity to advocate, to ask questions, to demand accountability, to demand explanations. But I also want to be clear that, whoops, so clear that I closed my paper, about the distinction in roles, because where I'm pushing and advocating is more broad than on the specific order. And a lot of questions that I get, have gotten throughout this crisis are, why aren't I telling Dr. Cody what to do? Why does she have this kind of authority? So let me just make that clear to this group as well. Dr. Cody has 2 formal roles, both of which have different granting authority. She's the Director of Public Health, which is a position to which she was hired by our county executive, Jeff Smith, who we, the board, hire and manage, and I'll come back to him. Her other role, however, as the Public Health Officer, is a position that is granted to her by the state of California. So it's important to note that the position which grants her authority to issue public health orders, such as those regarding COVID, are not granted and not overseen by the county, but by the state. So as that relates to the Board of Supervisors, we're responsible for hiring and managing 6 county executives, one of whom is our county exec, Dr. Smith. The health orders are simply one piece of our COVID response. Far more pieces have been built up in our response capabilities, which included building up hospital and PPE capacity, testing, housing options for those at risk in the unhoused population, contact tracing, isolation supports, and now supports for small businesses and impacted employees. All of those pieces fall under the purview of the county exec, who we do manage. So for me, the primary role for the Board of Supervisors is that while Dr. Cody continues to issue orders that she feels are necessary to keep us safe, we demand the highest amounts of transparency, accountability, and excellence in how our administrator handles the response.
Okay, thank you. I think my time's up.
Thanks, Jay.
Thank you. We're going to move on to hotels and hospitality with either Jimmy or Enrique, if they're here. I thought Jimmy was here. Well, we'll move on and we'll circle back. We're going to move on to general retail and services with Chris or April.
Hi, Wissa. Thank you, Supervisor Ellenberg. You may have answered the question. I'm Chris Patterson Simmons and business owner, and I wanted to ask about who is going to be the advocate for the loans for the small businesses, or is it going to be just you apply and whoever gets the loan or picks up the loan or is willing to support the loan, that's who we're dealing with? And I guess my other question would be, who can we go to for support, for our questions, for our status? Because I'm a victim of being neglected about this SBA loan. I did everything dotted every I, crossed every T, and I'm still waiting for $6,000 from April. And I haven't gotten any kind of response from anybody. I did reach out to Stacy with Ash Caldero's office from our last meeting. And believe it or not, she just responded 5 minutes ago, apologizing for being busy. And I understand that. I just appreciate that she did respond. So my question is, who's going to help us and support us and walk us through this situation with the loans?
So that is a terrific question. I am really sorry to hear that you're having such trouble getting money back. And it sounds like you may be squarely within the category of the type of businesses that we are looking to support. I don't have answers yet because the administration hasn't come back with their model, or if there's more than one possible model with options. But what I'm envisioning will happen is that there will be one financial lender, and we as a board will create criteria for eligibility, and we will publicize that information very broadly in all of our districts so that businesses will be able to see, do they meet the criteria? If they meet the criteria, they apply for the loan. If they have questions or it's moving slowly or they're not sure what's happening, depending on the location of the business, you should go to your county supervisor's office. So I represent District 4, which is the cities of Campbell and Santa Clara, and a bunch of neighborhoods in West San Jose that overlaps with 3 council districts. So if you live in my supervisorial district and you believe that you are qualified, that you meet the criteria, someone in my office will absolutely help you and walk you through the process. And I expect that the same thing will be the case with my colleagues.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm sorry for running out of the time, but April, if you have something to add, there's a minute left. Thank you.
Absolutely, Chris.
No, I'm good. Let's move on to the next group. Thank you, April and Chris. We're going to try and return back to performance and entertainment venues. Scott, you want to give it another try and see if you can unmute? Still, we can see your, yeah, we can't hear you.
All right, I'll take it for Scott. This is my
Okay.
committee as well. So I'm representing performance and entertainment venues. And as I'm sure we are all aware, performances and events were the first thing to close, and we are assumed to be the last thing to open. We're really looking for fairness here and hoping that we can be looked at as more than a frivolity, and that the significant positive community impact of our industry and the fact that we are professional people movers, and that if anyone can do this safely, it is event people, that this can all be taken into account. With guidelines for movie theaters opening at limited capacity and with guidelines being approved in other areas for TV and film, we're asking for some fairness and reasonableness in looking at performance venues and event venues. And we hope that the county can help us advocate in this regard. So what can we do to get the county to prioritize establishing approved safety guidelines for indoor venues?
So thank you for that. And I would absolutely say that we don't believe the arts community to be about frivolity. We know that arts and entertainment are part of the great richness of our lives. And I think never do we need them so much as when everything else around us seems to be falling apart and a challenge. So I fully recognize and respect and appreciate the value of your sector and industry. A number of months ago, dozens and dozens of business sectors were invited to make presentations at a hearing before the Board of Supervisors. I think there was anticipation, reasonably so, that following that meeting, all of those plans that were proposed by the different sectors would be taken into account. That didn't appear to happen. As we have moved forward with the tiered system and we switched from a sector by sector basis to a risk mitigation basis, that's where we started to see really some of these seeming inequities play out. So what I would recommend is that if you've got plans right now, continue to share them with your supervisor. If you're, again, in my district, I'm happy to do this for you, and see if you can organize meetings with Dr. Cody and Dr. Smith to be able to walk through these proposals. I think that there is, as they take a breath and feel that there's a little bit more in control right now, have been willing to, in many cases, sit down with particular groups, certainly members of county council, such as Tony Felice, if you haven't met, that's not the right name, Tony Lopresti, in county council's office, has met with a number of sector representatives to walk through plans and to see if we really can move closer to having the businesses themselves provide more substantial input. So my recommendation would be first to reach out to County Council, Tony Lopresti, see if you can get a meeting on behalf of your sector. And if you are challenged with that, give me a call and I'll help you set that up.
Thank you. We will reach out. Will the county set up a task force to develop a timeline and criteria for reopening venues?
So that's something else I tried a couple of months ago. I got zero support on that from my colleagues. So no, I don't think that there will be a task force such as this one. I think, frankly, I think that's unfortunate because this kind of conversation, not just with the supervisor, but with folks from public health and county council, would be immensely helpful. But it looks like that is not going to happen. I haven't seen a change in support for that kind of model.
I think we're at time.
Muted. Okay, I'm going to move on to food and beverage with Fernanda or Adriana.
Hi, thank you, Supervisor, for being here. I think, like a lot of businesses, one of our biggest concerns is the opening and then closing again. More so in the restaurant business, because we invest a lot of money in perishable items that won't last for a very long time. So I was curious and seeing if you could share with us, what is the procedure or what is your process in thinking about closing again? So a lot of us are not opening because at 25%, like myself, we choose to wait. But there's also nervousness of opening, investing in all of this, perishable items, and then having to close again. So is there a guideline of when the county chooses to close again, or is that something you can let us know?
Yeah, so these aren't guidelines or choices so much as they are dictated by case counts. As long as we keep our case counts at the level they are now or lower, and we stay in the orange tier, we shouldn't have to close anything or move backwards. If we have a huge spike in cases that rolls us back to the red or even the purple tier, then we will have to close down. And again, Dr. Cody has been so cautious specifically for this reason, because I believe that she does fully understand not only the financial challenges, but the emotional toll of going forward and backward. So she has been very cautious, creeping us forward. Our numbers are holding right now. I think a continued frustration is that even though we're in the orange tier, our restrictions on indoor venues, as you mentioned, are at 25%, whereas the state would allow 50%. What she has seen in other counties and shared with the public is that counties that have moved faster have had to roll back. So what I think a good question is, to which I don't have the answer, but how do we move even farther in the right direction? What do we need to do to get our case count down even further? What do we need to do to increase testing even more so that we can get into a further reduced state and allow more openings rather than risking going back to closing? And if any of you were at the Silicon Valley Leadership Group conference this morning, Dr. Fauci gave us 5 directions, none of which should be a surprise to any of you. He believes we need universal mask mandates. Everybody needs to be wearing a mask. Everybody needs, the second was maintaining social distancing, which we know. The third is washing your hands, that boring little kindergarten lesson is truly critical. Outdoors over indoors. And I am forgetting the fifth one that he said. Oh, avoiding congregate settings. So much of this is in our control. And this absolutely sounds like and is a soapbox pitch to every one of you to wear a mask, make sure everyone around you is wearing a mask, maintain the distancing, even as the holidays are coming up and we are all desperate to do things in our normal ways, avoiding congregate settings with people that you're not usually with. We've got to keep these numbers down through the holidays. And I think that's the biggest hump that we're going to face. I'll also make a quick pitch for testing, please. scc.freetest.org. You can get a free test regardless of insurance, regardless of immigration status, really regardless of absolutely anything, but having a nose so that you can get the test, you get your results quickly. The greater numbers we have, the better we can know where the cases are and importantly, where they aren't, keep our positivity rate down and keep moving to greater reopenings. Please get tested and get tested regularly, just for fun.
Thank you. We're going to move on to our faith-based and community space committee. I think we have Gabrielle here.
Good to see you.
Hey, Gabrielle.
I have more than 4 minutes worth, so I may have to email you. And, one of the things that our committee has talked about is that faith-based communities and community spaces like the Billy DeFrank Center and the African American Community Center and all the city community centers are sort of seen as very different from the other businesses. We haven't quite come up with the actual project, but we want to work together to connect with the businesses on an equal level, you know, so that they know who we are, they know we're there for them, we really support them. We want our people to go dine out or take out, you know, we want them to know that, and we want them to value us as well. So we're coming up with different ideas. I know the Billy DeFrank Center now has the Red Dot Fitness business in our parking lot doing al fresco fitness. And, you know, they've set up a gym. That's us individually, but us as a coordinated group of organizations that really are run like businesses, but people perceive us differently. My fantasy is having a list of all of us available on very nice flyer, giving out high-end masks, you know, I don't know, at the businesses. And I don't know, we haven't come up with a project, but you know, we want to be valued as part of that and be on the list with the county's consciousness that we are part of the business community. And how that partially could happen is, you know, on the tier flyer, community centers are not even mentioned. And I've contacted everyone about that. Faith-based communities are mentioned, but we're not. And there's a lot of our community centers out there. So just sort of elevating our value along with businesses would be really great.
Yeah, thank you for that, Gabrielle. I appreciate the distinction, and you're right. And we have been working to a significant degree with the faith-based community and understanding their concern with not being able to bring people together and provide all of the communal and pastoral and supportive services, much as Billy DeFrank and other community centers do. And it's not so unlike the arts community. These are all sectors that speak to us as whole human beings, not just economic engines, but all of the pieces that we need to be safe. Again, the primary focus is going to continue to be on that physical safety and helping all of these community groups and faith-based groups to find as much as they can, ways to connect in meaningful ways remotely, or as long as possible, as long as the weather permits outside. And my hope is that a month or so of being in the orange tier, maybe we'll be looking at increasing attendance up to 50%. That is not a promise, and that's not from Dr. Cody, but it's something I've committed to asking 4 weeks after we entered this orange tier. Can we move up to be the same as the state? And we'll see.
Yeah, I'm wondering if retail is open, can we have rummage sales? If movie theaters are open, can we show movies, you know, in faith-based communities and centers? I mean, you know, sort of emulating what's allowed in the business community.
Yeah, Gabrielle, that's a great question. And as a great D4 community center, I would say send those suggestions to my office, particularly to Christine, and let's see what we can broach together and find out if that's within the current rules.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to Arts and Special Events Committee. So as you notice, we're very similar to performance and entertainment venues, but our committee represents primarily organizations and artists themselves, rather than they may or may not have a facility adjacent to them or part of their services. Our first question is, now that the state, their COVID website finally has language about live outdoor performance, we're wondering, available to counties in the orange and yellow tier, we're wondering when we can expect Santa Clara County public health to align. And I know a lot so far you've been saying it's not really in your jurisdiction, but I'm wondering if you have an inkling about what might happen.
I've given the best answer that I can to that, which is that Dr. Cody's abundance of caution comes from wanting to avoid moving backwards. There are measures. You can look at the state website. I don't want to quote anything offhand without having it in front of me, that shows what we need to do to get into the yellow tier. And if you look at that and then check our dashboards every day, you'll see if we're getting closer to that tier or moving farther from it. Moving from orange to yellow is a really big leap, and we are really just barely in the orange on the red side. So to me, a really important goal over this next 2 months would be to stay in the orange and not move back to the red. I think if we can do that and get through this holiday season and the end of the year without moving back into the red, again, we'll have really cleared a significant hurdle. So again, getting yourselves tested, wearing your masks, doing all of those things literally helps us move the needle and move closer to more broad reopenings.
Thank you. Brendan?
Okay, great. Thank you, Supervisor, for taking the time today. Much appreciated. Very much understand that the economic development is not traditionally the purview of the county, but certainly this is not usual times.
Exactly.
And parts of our economy are feeling it a lot worse than others. On the loan program piece, I'm wondering, appreciate you guys trying to get creative about it, and I'm wondering if there might be scenarios where things like a business's various taxes and fees that we pay to the county might be considered as part of the paying of the loan piece, if those types of pieces might be able to be taken off that as a structure.
So Brendan, that's super interesting, and I'm happy to take that back. I definitely don't know the tax law piece to be able to guess whether that would be allowed or not. But truly, the county council is now investigating ways that we can do this. So any of you that have ideas, you are welcome to send them to me. I'll pass them along. Maybe it'll be some, brilliant thing that they didn't think of, or they'll say this won't work because X, but at least we'll know they have considered it.
Okay.
That's terrific. Thank you.
Well, I think another piece is as a task force, we're trying to look at ways of economic recovery to happen for downtown. And looking at some scenarios you might be familiar with, enhanced infrastructure financing districts, which work on a tax increment, which would have impacts, and I think would need approval from the county if there was a tool like that the city considered establishing. And I was wondering if your thoughts on the willingness of the county to get behind that for a particular geography like downtown that has been, disproportionately hit by this.
Again, that's a tax question that's a little bit beyond me, Brendan. I know that cities in general have far more latitude and flexibility with regard to levying taxes and determining how they're going to be spent. The county authority, but from the state to do that is much more restricted. And without seeing specific language, I certainly couldn't speak for the county to say would we support it or not. But if there is a proposal like that from a city, it's absolutely worth bringing to us to see if this is something that we can either support or lead on.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Sure. And the more cooperation we have between each of the cities and the county, I think the better we can serve our local residents and local businesses.
Okay. I'm going to open it up to our members at large. So Blogade, Laura, Jonathan, or Stacy, if you have any questions for the supervisor.
Hi, this is Laura. No questions, but a huge thanks, Supervisor Ellenberg, and to your team, not only for being here, but for everything you've done during this. Just big thanks.
Thanks, Laura. Nice to hear your voice.
Here, here.
Could I jump in?
It's your meeting.
Great. Well, we hand it over to our chairs. So there's just 2 points. One, we've actually been trying to get Dr. Cody to come to this task force. We were unsuccessful, but I heard you mention that potentially one of the committees, right, if they were interested, if they wanted to be able to engage with Dr. Cody or her team, that they could. Would you be willing to help us with that regard, even if it's not with the task force here, but even if there are individual committees or efforts that we put into our request later? Is that something you'd be willing to help us with?
Yeah, here's I think the right way to do this, Raul, because of course the worry is so many different committees and different groups. Does that get overwhelming? And then there's the issue of who is left out and who gets into the schedule. I would truly start with County Council and specifically Tony Lopresti. He has been doing a phenomenal job meeting with groups of businesses.
We did get Tony. Tony did join us. So that was sort of, yeah.
Okay, and was that helpful? And did groups follow up with him?
It was
the estheticians followed up with him and the churches followed up.
It was helpful. Yes, it was definitely helpful. But certainly there were some question marks, and that's why I think there was an interest to invite yourself, right? Somebody on the elected level. And then I think you described pretty well for us today the kind of the hierarchy, right, of who it is that the Board of Supervisors oversee and what that's like. So I think that's also been confusing to everybody on who do we call, right? Who's responsible for who? And so but if it's just Tony that typically takes these meetings, because I know that's who took it for us, then maybe we got as high as we can go. But that was my interest, because it sounded like there potentially would be an opportunity with Dr. Cody. If there is, great. I was wondering if you could help. If not, if it's Tony, then we did have that meeting.
And Raul, she does I think it's now bi-weekly calls with all local electeds, and I think they're regular cadence calls with small businesses. And there's an email line. And again, whatever district each of you is in, you should go to your own supervisor and ask for help and advocacy. Again, we're not challenging the order specifically, but we are absolutely responsible for looking at how we best support our communities within the context of those orders.
Great, thank you. And then the only other part was in regards to potentially if we do have a need to sort of close back up some services, which we're all hoping that that is not the case.
Yeah.
But I think it was Taki who asked about, hey, will we be, just going backwards the same way we went forward, or will we be taking into consideration potentially, right, what industries have actually shown, maybe through tracking and tracing, that they have caused, because I know right now, one of the things throughout the state and throughout the country, tracking and tracing is showing it's for the most part, it's a lot of these personal gatherings people are having at their homes and stuff like that, right? And so will that be taken into account that you know of, or is that not something you're aware of yet?
That's a really good question, and I will. I think I have a team member listening in on this call too, who can follow up with me and get an answer to that, because the initial thought was, well, of course we would go reverse the order that we're in right now, but now we have evidence. And for example, with the personal care, I think facials and that kind of activity has been most recently allowed. One might argue from a pure perspective that they should be the first ones to close back down again if we have to be more conservative. But if there hasn't been a single case traced to that industry, then that would make no sense to be going backwards there. But it's a great question, and I will pose that to Dr. Cody. In fact, I'll do it in public at the board meeting on Tuesday. So
Great. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I definitely think that would go a long way with some of our business owners, rather than just, sticking to the same plan going backwards. If we now have some evidence, it would be great that we utilize that. So
absolutely. It's a fantastic point.
That was it for me. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. We have just a few more minutes with the supervisor. I would like to open it up, actually turn it over to public comment. We have one raised hand from our attendees at large. We're going to give him, Bill, we see you. We're going to give you 2 minutes, and then we'll circle back to Chris. I see you also have your hand up from the committees. Okay, so
Bill, if you'll just accept my unmute.
There you go. Thank you. Supervisor, hey, thank you for taking the time. I am the president of the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees here in Santa Clara County. I represent over 1,200 workers, between 1,200 and 1,500 workers that we utilized last year in the concert, convention, and theater industry. First of all, let me thank you for at least some clarity on the breakdown of who's in charge of who. I'm never a big fan of an unelected official who has the ability to control the financial situations of thousands of working families, in this case, Dr. Cody. I do realize she's done a very good job, but I would like every once in a while that the public be recognized that we're the ones that actually are taking the brunt of all of this. Where, I've listened to political figures and people tell me about how wonderful these people are, but my people have not received a paycheck in 8 months. We have lost our health care. We have lost our retirement. We have people losing their homes. And we have no faith at this point in listening to Jeff Smith in his future outlook of our industry. And it's been pushed aside. I spoke to the attorneys in one of the task force. I asked them about car concerts being allowed. It's a very minuscule thing, 8 people maybe that might get some work. We work everything from children's musical theater to the Rolling Stones. That was crushed. And talking with the vice president of the Sharks, I have an agreement with them. We have no hope. I mean, Jeff Smith and Sarah Cody are making it sound as if it could be another year and that there probably won't be a vaccine. I mean, I don't know what to tell my people. There will not be a workforce left moving forward. We understand to take baby steps. We know the industry very well. It's my 40th year in it. And I just have to tell you that, and please express this, because I've written many letters to the supervisors regarding this. There are thousands of working families tied to this industry, whether it's conventions or music, that are losing everything. And so you need to be aware that there are families going under and becoming part of that 8 million that are going into poverty. And it seems like there isn't anybody listening or caring at this point at the Jeff Smith level. And so it's frustrating to us in the industry not even having a glimpse of hope at this point if we can't even do a car concert. So I appreciate you being here because I know it's important, but I do think it's important to hear from families that are getting crushed and losing everything by the rules that are being put in place. And we know we need to play along for a while, but at some point, it's going to be hard to hold these workforces back from having their voices heard louder. So and I appreciate you listening because I ramble, so I understand that.
William, I don't disagree with anything that you said. And also your people should not feel held back from making themselves heard. Come to public comment. That's where you get in front of Dr. Cody in the most reliable way. Stories like your community are at the heart of why we looked to this loan program, because there's only so long that you can tell people to hang tight, wear your mask. I know I'm still telling you to do this, but when you have gone through your savings and you have no opportunities on the horizon, then you're starting to, to feel that you're being told. Sorry, it actually works me up too, and I realize that I'm not being articulate right now, but let me just say that I agree with you. I think it's untenable. I think that our community has been so remarkable and phenomenal in adhering to the orders for as well and as long as you have. That is why I think we owe you, your local government, some resources to be able to make you whole a little bit and to continue to advocate for further reopenings, and in lieu of that, further support to the folks that can't reopen. County government is ultimately about safety net services. And frankly, the more people that fall out of economic stability, the more people that will need to rely on county services. So one way or another, everyone is our responsibility. So in my view, the more that we can do now to keep people housed, employed, and insured, the less we'll have to do on the back end as more people struggle. So I do not have a great answer for you. Please know that I hear you. Please don't think for a moment that I don't care. And I'm certain once again that I'm speaking for my colleagues. We care, we're working. We're facing crazy limitations too, and turning over every stone to see how we right this ship as we ride it out to a vaccine or towards spring or toward whatever the next miracle is.
I think, oh, I saw April just raised her hand. We're going to take one more question with the supervisor, and then we will have to move on to our next agenda item. So Chris, hopefully you and April are thinking the same thing. We have like a minute for you to present your question and a minute for the supervisor to respond.
I'll be brief. Okay. Thank you again, Supervisor Ellenberg. My question is to touch on what you were sharing about the meeting you had with Dr. Fossey, and he had like 5 points. We have over 228 boarding care homes in our city in San Jose. My question is anybody going back to the beginning like we did in March and April and reaching out to these boarding cares about these residences that they have that are wandering our streets that don't have a clue about this virus? They're not wearing masks, and I think they're not being treated fairly because they need to have the same webinars, Zoom calls, and the same information so they could reach out to their clients and remind them they have the ability and responsibility to be safe as well. You can go down on East Santa Clara Street and you can count in 5 minutes about 10 people walking around that are homeless or displaced without mask.
So Chris, let me try to give, that is far more than a 1 minute answer, but I'm going to just give you a really interesting statistic right now. The Valley Homeless Healthcare Program has had outreach workers in all of the known encampments or gathering areas for unhoused community members. They're out there regularly. They do give out masks. Obviously, they can't force people to put them on. They're testing them. And for some reason that I cannot understand, the positivity rate among the unhoused residents is one of the lowest in the county. And I don't know if it's because they're all inside or it's I'm serious. It's incongruous to me, but that's a population that I somehow would have expected to be spreaders or to have a higher positivity rate, and absolutely the opposite is true.
Well, that's a small blessing, and thank you again for showing your sensitivity to this too. Thank you for answering.
Yeah, thank you, all of you, and thank you, Councilmember Perales, for inviting me. I'm sure I didn't answer all of everybody's questions. You can reach me at supervisor.ellenberg@bos.sccgov.org, and I am happy to do whatever I can to help you. If I don't represent your district, there are 4 others just like me who will say the same thing. So take good care of yourselves. Thank you, and wear your masks and get tested.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor.
Thank you. On behalf of the task force members and the members of our subcommittees, we do want to thank you for being here today and responding to our questions and feedback. We know your time is valuable and appreciate all that you and your team and the supervisors are doing for our county.
Absolutely.
So thank you for being here.
Thank you all so much. Have a great day. Bye.
All right, so we'll move on.
Yes, so we do have some good news today because our task force has been operating efficiently, working a bit ahead of schedule. We now have the first draft of the task force recommendations for consideration. The plan is for us to review it today and return back to our committees to solicit additional feedback, and then come back on November 18th for one final meeting to approve. So I'd like to now invite Councilmember Perales to present on the first draft of recommendations.
All right, thank you. And appreciate it. We have a lot of work that's gone into this to date here. And I certainly want to appreciate and thank all of you for your work and your commitment up to this point. And I am personally committed to whatever recommendations are crafted and driven by this body to usher them through. So a quick recap on what we have done in the past 2 months here. So in September, we first convened and worked to set a baseline of where your respective industries are. Based on your feedback, it was critical that we involved our state and county partners. There was also a desire to discuss what is being done regarding marketing and communications. We then met with representatives from the county, Tony and Grace, and they were helpful in answering many of the questions you all had. It also helped generate ideas on some potential recommendations. However, based on your feedback, we heard that there was additional dialogue needed with the county. And so we also solicited your feedback on how to spend the $100,000 downtown revitalization budget. Sorry, that was just a subsequent item that we touched on that meeting, the second meeting. The third meeting, we had a great discussion with State Assembly Member Ash Kalra, and he presented us with potential policy opportunities. We also had Laura here from the task force share what Team San Jose is doing in terms of marketing and instilling consumer confidence. And then it brings us to today. And for the second meeting, we invited Supervisor Susan Ellenberg, obviously in the conversation we just had here, in hopes to expand on some of the policy ideas that we can recommend to the county. And so obviously based on today's conversation, we fully expect there to be potentially some additions. And just in general, what we're going to be presenting right now is just a first draft of recommendations. Following today's meeting and your feedback, we're going to ask that you all go back to your committees, solicit further feedback, and then we'll bring it back to the full task force on November 18th so that we can amend and approve a comprehensive package of recommendations. All right. Based on this process, my staff has been working through all of the feedback provided from the task force and the committees and have produced this first draft of recommendations, and with 3 following focus areas. 1, achieve the scope set out by the task force. 2, ensure it's rooted in the task force and committee discussions. And then 3, with measurable deliverables. So the recommendations themselves. In phase 1, the recommendations were completely aimed at the city. We did have a letter to the county and we did have some lobbying up at the state, but the recommendations were completely aimed at the city. This time we've shifted the approach into 3-pronged legislative approach aimed at the city, the county, and the state. So our hope is that our legislative partners that we've been meeting with will help us to usher the recommendations through at their respective jurisdictions. So first, with myself at the city level, there are 5 focus areas so far. Number 1, continuing to follow up on the phase 1 recommendations, because certainly those are still ongoing and not all of them were addressed. Number 2, propose ideas for the upcoming city budget process, including exploring additional financial assistance for businesses severely impacted. Number 3, explore new city policy updates, such as to parking or land use changes. Number 4, work to push for inclusive marketing and communications, including promoting not only our restaurants and retail, but the activities of our arts and community groups. And number 5, as we continue to have a good working relationship with our Intergovernmental Relations Director, Bennett Chang, who I believe is joining us today as well, we hope the city will continue advocating for economic recovery interests to the other jurisdictions. All right, and moving on to the county. So at the county level, there are 3 focus areas so far. Number 1, the need for a proactive creation of safety guidelines, especially for indoor venues. Number 2, allowing for smaller scale local or regional conventions and performing arts events. Number 3, we also got feedback from our airport asking that the county explore streamlining the mandatory indoor dining customer checklist. And the recommendation was to have something such as a QR code or other digital means to lift some of the administrative burden from our already burdened business owners. And this is something that is currently, I think, expected to be done by hand, by paper, potentially. And so, okay, third, at the state level, there's 3 focus areas here as well. Number 1 is, as Assemblymember Calra had committed to, see if there are any additional funding opportunities in the state budget process to provide assistance for our arts community. Number 2, the second is to ask ABC, Alcohol and Beverage Control, to not only continue their regulatory relief, but consider making some of it permanent, such as the to-go cocktails, and allowing for designated open container districts. And number 3, finally, similarly to the county, to ask to allow for smaller scale local regional conventions and performing arts events. And so again, this is only the starting point, and we look forward to getting your feedback. And now I'll turn it back to our co-chairs.
Dahlia, I think we're going to open it up for questions. To this time, to allow for more organic discussion, please click your raise hand feature or the function, and we'll just be moving to, it says we're going to move to live notes. So please raise your hand if you have any comments about the first draft of the recommendations. Brendan.
Sure. I was just going to comment on the part related for at the state level. One of the things we had asked Osh about that he said he'd check into was on seeing if there's something at the state level that can be done for downtowns across the state. I'm not particularly sure off the top of my head what that might look like, but I know the state has done different downtown district support things in the past. So.
Thank you. Hopefully we can, all right, great. We're adding that in, it looks like there. I'm not seeing any other raised hands. Lisa, are you?
Jay is physically raising his hand.
Yeah, it's physical. Oh. For some reason, I can't find the button to do a raised hand. Raul, thank you to you and your team for making those proposals. So just based upon the discussion today, obviously we should be including the funding mechanism that the county is working on, actively engaging and participating in trying to influence that and advocate for it. And I hope that the advocacy will include expanding its reach beyond only those businesses that are entirely closed, because there's a lot of others that are hurting and on the brink of going under if they can't find resources. I also heard today that the effective way to actually advocate with the county in terms of trying to get more assistance for business to open is to have a dialogue directly with Dr. Cody and with our county executive. And I would love for the city to be working on trying to help that dialogue get created and on a regular basis so that there is routine opportunity. I've got to tell you, I still am not clear why, for policy purposes and decision-making on health issues, lawyers, and I obviously am respectful of lawyers, and county council are the ones who are put in a position of being the people to answer questions, or to be the ones to say, I'll take it back to the executive team. I heard those as two really important opportunities to follow up on. And then finally, I'm not exactly sure how to accomplish it, but I didn't see in our recommendations much emphasis on businesses, facilitating businesses to open so that employees can come downtown and actually occupy and use restaurant and retail and all those other things we want to do. So I do look to my committee to help in that regard, but I also want to encourage you and your team to be mindful of the need to emphasize business reopening.
And I just want to respond and then ask you one question as well. So in regards to the emphasis of the city helping to facilitate that role of kind of the dialogue with the public health officials or the county admin, we have at best what we're doing right now is at an emergency operations level. There is regular and ongoing conversations, but that's not something that I'm even involved in. The only public conversations we've been able to have is when we had a joint meeting with the county board. Those happen at best a couple times a year. And so there wouldn't be an opportunity for a regular conversation there. What we would need to do is, I think we would need to add that to our county level recommendations, that rather than the city, and then see if we couldn't get whether it's Susan or Cindy or another supervisor to try to champion that opportunity for more regular dialogue. And then secondly, I would love to hear your thoughts, and you don't have to give them now, but as you go back to the committee, on how we could take that second role or charge of getting some of the businesses to bring, potentially some of their staff back in. I know that's right now, right? That's a personal decision that each companies are taking, and many of them have decided to just say, we're not coming back anytime soon. And so if you have some thoughts in that regard, I think we're happy to include those in the recommendations, but I would love for your committee to kind of try to figure out what that might look like.
No, that's a great point. And I should be clear that when I say businesses to reopen, I mean office businesses that employ staff and others who will bring bodies into town.
Yep.
That was my focus. And I do agree with you that we need to have that discussion at our subcommittee level to try and come up with ideas. I do think there's linkage between that question and the first point about a dialogue with the county health director and executive to try and get them to facilitate those employing businesses to be able to reopen. And I totally understand your comment about the politics of how best to make that happen and where the limitations are. I was presenting it to you from a city perspective because maybe Pollyannishly, I kind of have this belief that they'll listen more to you than they will to anybody else. But I get what you said, and thank you.
I'm not seeing anyone either physically or functionally raising their hands, but we do have one from the public. Bill has his hand up as well. Do we want to switch there? Okay. If we can unmute Bill. Thank you.
Can you go ahead and accept the unmute, Bill?
Thank you. First of all, thanks to all of you for putting up with me. I know that it gets kind of the same speech over and over again. I want to come back in a different life as Jay or Raul, where I can talk coherently. and not be so emotional about what we're facing here. I just wanted to get some clarity, and maybe Raul, I know Dahlia or Raul maybe can answer this. The proposing of guidelines by the state or by the county. Dahlia, you emailed me the other day just asking about actors and putting together some guidelines to how we go about, having actors come back. And I reached out to Actors Equity. I also reached out to the vice president of stagecraft for the International and to the opera in San Francisco and to our local in San Francisco. What is the procedure for guidelines? Because we've been told that the state will hand down guidelines that the county will then follow. Do they want us? I mean, our International has put together tons of guidelines. So are we supposed to be pitching guidelines to the county for these different areas? What's your take on that? Because it seems to be that we can pitch forward with guidelines, but we still have to get them from the state in order for the county to go by them. If somebody could fill me in on that, that would be great.
Yeah, from everything that we have learned, anybody can pitch some guidelines. I think it's a matter of right, who's pitching it and how it's received, because, and that's why honestly part of the task force, right, our goal was to have a more unified voice, right, something that sort of could for instance, if you had some recommendations and it's something we could fit into our recommendation list that we're building now, then it kind of comes from all of us, right? It comes from the task force, even though it might specifically impact your industry. At the same time, I think there's nothing stopping, yourself or a coalition within your industry to pitch some recommendations, whether it be at the state level or at the county level. As I think Susan was just saying, right, that if somebody or a particular industry was interested in talking with Dr. Cody, although I don't think it was Dr. Cody, right? I think it was the attorneys, and that they could do so. And so I think either or both would be my recommendation, especially with as much as your industries are struggling. I would say, let's try to include whatever we can into this recommendation list that fits. And then additionally on your own, I think it would be beneficial, right, to work through some of these channels, be it Supervisor Ellenberg or Oshkara, and using them as a liaison to say, okay, now how do we, continue to get some lobbying at the county and the state level as well.
Thank you.
I think if I can just chime in, and I'm hoping I'm not repeating anything that's already been said, but I think where we are is we're not, performing arts and venues and community centers to that extent are not on the radar, right? They're not including us in the industry guidelines that are out there. So the more we advocate for ourselves and present them with ready-made cases and guidelines and examples from across the country where they have reopened using these guidelines and they haven't seen spikes in their area, or at least in that industry, I think that will possibly raise us up in the order of consideration, because right now they've just lumped us as unsafe practices, like whether it's our vocalists or the gatherings at community centers. Yeah, so I think we saw some great action on behalf of the theaters in trying to get the county to recognize that they could open their venues to record live streaming events, but that took them advocating and sort of presenting a scenario where it works, because at first the county was telling them no, as you probably well know, Bill. So I think we need to do both, as Councilmember Perales is saying. I did see Brendan, wait, oh, you took down your hand. I think we see Brendan and then April.
I was just going to ask, and it might be a question for Benna, whether there was any opportunities at the federal level. There's still some things talking about on another CARES, bill. There's some things like National Independent Venues Association that have been trying to lobby at the federal level for support for the presenting performing arts sector. And if there was ability for the city of San Jose through its lobbying efforts to get behind that and lend its voice towards that end, that would be helpful.
Thank you, Brendan. I'll take that as a note. And I think a lot in terms of whether or not there's additional stimulus depends on what happens after Election Day. So we are all watching and waiting But I think there will be a desire to continue to do some economic recovery. So yeah, and maybe I can follow up with you offline on the National Independent Venue folks and what they're doing. But yeah, thank you for that suggestion.
April?
Okay, yeah. So I don't know if this is the appropriate place to ask this question, but just kind of thinking about, like, since we happen to be in like one of the most high-tech places in the world, why haven't we come up with like a more high-tech solution? Like other places are doing more rapid testing, for example. And I know that testing like helps our numbers out so we can reopen faster and so we can maintain safety guidelines in a way that's measurable. Why don't we have like an app or something that we develop that's based on like rapid testing, and it like encourages people to test like every week because they have a designation that allows them to go to an art event or something like that. Can we include that in this kind of like suggestion to the county? Or, you know, I don't know where that would be brought forward, that kind of idea. So just thought I'd lay it down here. That's it.
This is a super interesting suggestion. And I don't know if it can go in this list of recommendations. I'm sure Raul did hear that. I certainly did. Let's see. Why don't we circle back a little bit, April, and see if we can figure out how to work towards something like that. Oh, Raul, do you want to be able to respond to that? Probably
Yeah,
not immediately.
I think that's why we're actively taking the feedback here, and definitely I think, you know, again, why we want you to go back to the committees and kind of refine some of that, and what we'll do is we'll ultimately present the final you know, recommendations at the next task force meeting for everybody to adopt. But we're happy to, you know, to add in as much as gets suggested.
Physical hand raises, I see they kind of raise at the same time. So I'm going to go with Fernanda first and then Jay.
I don't know if anyone knows this answer or not, but what is happening with large businesses downtown? What's their guidelines? When are they coming back? Because, you know, our businesses are feeling that there's no one on the streets, there's no one down here working. And so what is the, you know, what are they, what guidelines are they following to come back?
Yeah, I'll try my best unless somebody else wants to chime in, but or Ben, I don't know if you wanted to chime in on, but so we're similar to City Hall, just like any other larger office spaces. We have to follow all the you know, distancing recommendations and guidelines. And so, for instance, at City Hall, we have a limitation of how many people can be on the elevator, right? So 2 people per elevator as it's going up and down and whatnot. And so we can have people back, and there are a very limited number of people back at City Hall right now. And I expect that's probably the same for most businesses. And part of the reason why we don't have a larger influx of people coming back is because the restrictions as they are, it actually makes it pretty difficult to function within City Hall as we normally would. And so a lot of people are just choosing not to, even though maybe we could be at a larger capacity within City Hall right now than we are. And I imagine that's probably the same for a lot of businesses, a lot of office spaces, for them to try and come in and retrofit and make the space work well and make elevators function well when you only have a limited number of people. It just makes it harder to get the work done, especially when you've been, you know, everybody's now been doing it social distancing at home. The other thing is we struggle to get people back in the office because of what's happening with the restrictions, say, for school. And so we have a lot of parents that are, you know, trying to manage their kids at home, and so they're not able to come back into the office. And I imagine that's also the same for a lot of these bigger businesses, right? That they, you know, because of the all around restrictions, it's making it, even if there is capacity in an office building, I think it's making it very difficult for office workers to come back in.
Well, just the only thing I would add, Raul, is that one, the belief that if you're not within the essential business function, you can't come down. And 2, frankly, the success of working remotely sort of feeds into all of not taking on the barriers that you were just mentioning, although there is an underlying sentiment of a desire to be able to get back into the office when you could do so safely and effectively.
Yeah, and I'll add, just there are no specific restrictions right now, Fernanda, that say, hey, big offices can't get back. They can under the same guidelines that the rest of us are following. But as Jay's pointing out, you know, a lot of it is a personal decision. We also struggle now, say, for instance, at regional level, there's an effort to try and convince a lot of office workers to work remotely due to limiting congestion on the roadways and greenhouse gas emissions. This is being done with the Planned Bay Area and the RHNA regional housing allocation goals. And and our mayor was quoted on this recently, kind of challenging the thought a little bit, that saying, sure, it's good on one end to have a significant portion of our office workforce work from home, but it's pretty bad on the other for areas like, you know, business cores and stuff like that, where, you know, obviously a lot of other secondary businesses rely on that office worker coming into an area. So I think there's multiple challenges, right? And a lot of it now is in a cultural shift. It's this cultural shift of people that have been working from home for so long that even as we're allowed to go back to work, some of them are not choosing to.
That's my fear. Yeah.
Go ahead, Dahlia. You can call on yourself.
And you're muted again.
I just want to say, in tandem with that, you know, I think that is going to be a longer term trend. I mean, a lot of tech companies are saying forever you can work from home. I know my husband, but this is really the opportunity to make clear how vital events and arts and performances are to the health of downtown. You know, if people will never go back to work in an office, which is quite likely for many situations, that makes community centers, performing arts, and events critical to even having a downtown. So I really think that that has to be part of the conversation immediately, or we all lose out. So I just wanted to highlight that real quick while we were on the topic of people not coming back to the office.
Yeah, if, two things. One, I've been trying to advocate, at least within our committee, that we've got to figure out a way to drive those employees to come back downtown, even if not for work. And so having the arts and other things. And so I think there's a hand in glove aspect of that. One of the questions I wanted to ask Raul, so I heard from Susan that the county focuses funding and its funding efforts on essentially health and related resources. And so that makes me think that in terms of advocating for federal dollars to come down to business, we would need to look to the state or the city. And so I wonder about the ability to include, as part of our task force recommendations, you know, some level of encouragement of both the city to advocate and the city to work with the state to advocate. Could you talk about the sort of the capacity of being able to look to the city to do something like that?
Yeah, that's definitely within our wheelhouse, and I'm glad Benna is on, because that exactly is what she's been doing for us at the state and ensuring at the federal level. And quite frankly, we've been waiting for this, you know, the next stimulus package, and you know, once it does come, absolutely, that's what we did with the first round. The city was able to direct a lot of those dollars to economic development, specifically to businesses, small businesses, and we are advocating for that. Ben is advocating for that now. But we can absolutely add that into the recommendation list. I think it might fit actually with what we already put in our first set of recommendations. So maybe we can just kind of retool that or update it. But Ben, if you wanted to chime in.
Yeah, absolutely. The council member is correct that we've been advocating for a long time for a bunch of different economic relief issues. And we've been talking as a team that as soon as the election happens, that we'd like to refresh some of that advocacy. Potentially with new people in the Senate, the House, and with administration, that there might be some additional opportunities. So I think that would fit in really well with our plans.
You know, my office too saw some recent efforts. Now we don't have as many resources as San Francisco does, as they're a county and a city combined, but Mayor Breed just recently unveiled an opportunity specifically for entertainment businesses, and that's something my office, you know, is considering. Is something that we can consider here, and I think we'll ask that that gets discussed at the committee, and potentially whether that's a recommendation here that could fall into the budget recommendations we were mentioning. But that's something that I think, you know, another way that maybe the city as well can help specifically with some of our businesses.
I'm looking for more hands here. Should we be? All right, I don't see any there. I see Bill's hand up here. Can we get Bill unmuted?
Yeah, sorry, I think that was a missed hand raise, but just want to
okay.
say, if I could just say thank you to Raul
Yeah.
for allowing me to participate. And what a great group of people you are to advocate for the city and jobs. It's been an eye opener, and I appreciate all of you. This is, you know, in 40 years, it's by far the most difficult thing that I never thought we'd have to go through. And I operate a food bank thanks to Hunger at Home down on the loading dock at the convention center 2 times a week. TSJ has been incredible. They are giving out turkeys for our people on Wednesday, but never did I think in my wildest dreams that my workforce would be shut down without any light at the end of the tunnel. So I really appreciate the intelligent minds that sit here in front of me, a high school educated guy who happened to have the ability to put people together and do contracts and get them work. But I do appreciate all of you tremendously. And I think together, hopefully, we'll get through it. I just have to be able to give my people a ray of hope. And as Shark's vice president said, we just hope there's a workforce when we come back. But I truly appreciate your guys' time and all of your effort. It's great to see people come together to try to achieve a goal this daunting, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you, Bill. I think you speak for all of us there for sure. All right, I think we said see you. Or was this public comment already?
It kind of feels like we did. It would have been public comment next. So attendees, you have like 3 seconds to raise your hand if you have anything you want to open up for public comment. If not, we'll keep moving forward on our agenda. I think, yeah, Bill said it really well. I just can say on behalf of an industry or business that is not allowed to open yet, it has been really frustrating to hear from different levels of government and elected official that we hear you and yet you need to talk to somebody else. And then it constantly feels like that. Like, you should be talking to council. Well, we talked to council and they said we need to talk to blah, blah, blah. And we're getting pushed, like we're getting passed around a little bit. And it's really hard to figure out how do we advocate for ourselves at this point and who do we talk to? So I think Jace, I mean, it's already written in the recommendations that we added today, but I think we need to be talking to who actually will be making decisions and before they pass us on to yet another level of government. And that said, of course, we want to be safe.
Yeah, and to add on to that, I know Susan didn't elaborate on it, but she actually challenged Jeff Smith, the county exec, on his order on restricting, well, it wasn't necessarily on his order, it was his the verbiage that he used when he talked about how the county is not allowing the outdoor arenas like Levi Stadium or Avaya Stadium to operate. And as she did point out, they do oversee, right, Jeff Smith, and that's their line of attack, right, is to go after Jeff, and then Jeff ultimately overseeing Dr. Cody, but unfortunately, in this case of state recommendation, she has some additional authorities. But I think that, you know, I would say the more pressure we apply, whether it's through the task force or individually, the collective pressure, it does make a difference, right? And so I just want to encourage you all to, you know, to kind of keep to it within, you know, sort of your own industries, but also I appreciate all of you continuing to participate with us in the task force. You know, it just helps to elevate the voice for everybody. And I share the frustrations that you do, where, you know, it's been very difficult to kind of to understand where to go with requests or demands, and you know, just appreciate everybody's participation here.
Thank you again, Council Member. I think we're almost done. We might even get out early.
I think at this time, if anyone has any announcements related to this task force, it's this is the time. Yeah. Oh, Gabriella, it looks like.
Oh, sorry. Let's do dine out and take out for Halloween everywhere. That's
So
just my catch cry for Halloween.
that sounds awesome, and I am definitely planning on it. Is Brendan, I think you have your hand up.
Yeah, I had just wanted to mention, I really appreciated Raul's comments there with the supervisor on that. You know, we got this all the new data that's been coming in, and we're getting a better, clearer picture about that transmissions happening in like small family household gatherings, and I don't know the fullness of the data specific to Santa Clara County of how, and if it's part of that could flow back to us again, or if we could be, you know, putting more and more pressure on that, because I think we're seeing it is that so many parts of our industries here are able to operate. We know what we're doing. We know how to put on safe events, and with that data, we could keep putting the pressure on.
I just got a great study. Maybe I'll share it with this whole group, but from a German group that studied actual performing arts events and transmission, and it's really encouraging. It was just sent to me by Californians for the Arts. I'll share that. Like I literally got it 5 minutes ago or something, but I'll I'll share that. There is research being done apparently in Germany.
And I definitely think that we will incorporate that into our list of recommendations, that as, you know, sort of as changes are made, especially if it's in the negative, to fall back on some more closures, that we utilize the data, right, that's being collected now, and not just necessarily go backwards the same way we came forward.
It looks like Chris Simmons has a hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to share and remind everybody that about the business tax exemption that's available for small businesses until September 2021. And that's going to be a great help to a lot of people also. And that was actually sent out by Christopher Dominique. He's the program manager for the City of San Jose Finance Department, though. So they can go to the website for the City of San Jose and find the actual document for the business tax exemption for COVID-19 assistance. I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Chris, for the reminder. Yeah. I am not seeing any other hands. Is anyone seeing any?
I'll just make a quick plug for San Jose Taiko's virtual Halloween. Typically, we have Halloween in Japantown tomorrow night, and brings over 600 families into Japantown, but can't do it this year. But we're doing a very short program online on San Jose Taiko's YouTube channel. Should be fun, and we're promoting the Japantown businesses. So if you can, please join in. There's also the jams down the street. Our museum is doing hidden histories. They're doing ghost stories from Japantown. Or around Japantown at 6 p.m. So that should be fun too. As in addition to Gabrielle's dine in, dine out, let's patronize each other and support each other during these really hard times. So I
sounds awesome.
I mean, we're finishing early. I think this is a record amount of time that we're finishing early, but this is our gift to you, 20 extra minutes in your afternoon. Wishing you all a very happy Halloween and safe Halloween, how we're planning to celebrate it. So thank you to everyone who participated today. Please note, next meeting will be Wednesday, November 18th, 2020, from 1 to 3 p.m. I believe most of us have restructured our subcommittee meeting schedule to meet one time before that time so that we can all review the draft recommendations as we covered them today. So please continue to visit sjd3.com/DTSJ recovery for updates. Be safe, be healthy, and take care. Meeting adjourned.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Oh,
Bye.
hello, little Raoul person.
Oh, hi, Jorge. Oh, good to see you.